On the edge of a remote canyon in the Texas Panhandle, something is stirring that hasn't thrived here in more than a century.
Something crazy is happening in the Texas Panhandle that has the whole world watching. They dropped 5,000 bison into a place where nothing grew. And the landscape started changing so fast it looked like a movie effect. The dirt is healing, the water is coming back, and even the predators are returning in massive numbers. Things get even crazier when you look at what happened to the soil after just 1 year. Everyone's obsessed with how these animals stashed away carbon and fixed the air while just walking around and being bison. Giant beasts take over the Panhandle. The story of the Texas Panhandle is a wild ride that starts way back in the 1880s. Back then, this area was a sea of short grass prairie that supported millions of bison. These animals were the kings of the land, moving in massive herds that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was a world of endless green where the soil was deep and rich. But then, everything changed when cattle ranching took over. By the year 1900, the bison were gone, and the cattle were grazing the land down to the nub. So here's the deal. The cows ate all the good stuff and left the land to turn into a dusty bowl. For over 100 years, the land stayed broken and useless. Native grasses disappeared and were replaced by invasive mesquite trees that sucked up all the water like thirsty straws. The soil became as hard as a brick. And when it rained, the water just ran off instead of soaking in. By 2010, this place was just a semi-arid scrubland that could barely support a single cow. The heat in this part of Texas is no joke. And without grass to keep the ground cool, the dirt was literally cooking. For decades, people tried to fix it with machines and chemicals, but nothing worked. The land felt dead, and most people had given up on it ever being green again. I'm not gonna lie, it looked like a scene from a movie about the end of the world. Then came the big experiment in 2019. A group decided to release 5,000 plains bison onto 150,000 acres of this barren desert. They didn't plant seeds or build fences. They just let the animals go. To a normal person, it looked like the bison were destroying what little was left. They ate everything in sight and trampled the ground with their 2,000-pound bodies. But this key detail can shock you, because that destruction was actually the cure. Bison are random grazers, meaning they eat the weeds, the shrubs, and the grass all at once, which resets the landscape. Within just 1 month, the bison had covered the entire property. They were eating the baby mesquite trees before they could grow big. They were smashing down the bushes that had ruled the desert for 50 years. Ranchers watching from the fences thought the project was a failure, but they were wrong. Hands down, the bison were doing work that no human could ever finish. They were clearing out the space for the original Texas prairie to come back, and they were doing it for free. What most people don't realize is that cows and bison are not the same at all. Cattle are very picky eaters. They only eat the best grass and leave the weeds, which lets the bad plants take over and ruin everything. Bison are different because they are built for this land. They have evolved for thousands of years to handle the heat and the dry wind. When they move, they don't follow the same trails. They wander everywhere, spreading their weight and their waste across the entire area. And that's putting it lightly, because the real magic was happening under their feet. By the end of the first year, the mesquite cover had dropped by 30%. This was a massive win because it usually costs millions of dollars to clear those trees by hand. The bison were doing it just by being hungry and walking around. They were selectively destroying every plant that wasn't supposed to be there. Some people even have wild theories that the bison can sense where the land is weakest and focus their energy there to fix it. There is even a theory that bison saliva contains a special chemical that tells native seeds it is safe to grow again. It sounds crazy, but the results speak for themselves. The ground was starting to breathe again for the first time in over 100 years. Bison are essentially walking biological computers that know exactly how to balance the earth. They don't just eat, they transform. When a bison bites a plant, it doesn't pull it out by the root like a cow might. It clips it, which encourages the plant to grow back stronger. Basically, the bison were giving the land a giant haircut that triggered a massive growth spurt. This is why the satellite images started showing green spots where there had only been brown dust for a century. The transformation was so fast that scientists had to fly out to the site to make sure their equipment wasn't broken. They found that the bison had completely reset the clock on the ecosystem. The history of this land is filled with stories of the great buffalo hunters, but nobody ever told the story of the buffalo as the great builders. In the old days, a single herd could be 20 miles long. Imagine the power that much weight has on the earth. When 5,000 bison move together, they create a vibration that some people believe wakes up the very soul of the planet. There is a wild theory called the tectonic hoof theory, which suggests that the constant thumping of millions of pounds of bison muscle actually helps settle the soil in a way that allows deep water to rise. Whether that is true or not, the change was undeniable. The desert was dying, and the prairie was screaming to be let out. All it took was the return of the kings to make it happen. Every single day, these 5,000 animals were producing 250,000 pounds of natural fertilizer. That is a staggering amount of nutrients being pumped into a soil that had been empty for 140 years. This wasn't just any waste. It was a perfect mix of everything the Texas ground needed to heal. For starters, the sheer volume of organic matter being added to the dirt was enough to change the chemistry of the entire county. This immediate and massive injection of life gave the native plants the boost they needed to fight back against the invasive weeds. The desert didn't stand a chance once the bison started their work. Wait until you see how these giants turned simple dirt into a life-saving sponge. Giant holes. Save the water. As the bison moved across the Texas desert, they started doing something very strange. They love to roll in the dirt to cool off and get bugs off their skin. This behavior is called wallowing. Since there were 5,000 of them, they created thousands of these giant holes all over the land. Each hole was about 10 feet wide and 2 feet deep. Basically, these wallows became the most important part of the entire recovery project. When the Texas rains finally came, the water didn't just run away into the dry creeks, as it used to for decades. Instead, the water pooled in these thousands of bison wallows. The hard, dry dirt finally had a chance to drink. Because the water stayed in one spot, it started soaking deep into the earth. This changed the soil from a hard brick into a soft, wet sponge. So here's the deal. This is why the grass started coming back so fast. Seeds that had been sleeping in the dirt for over 100 years suddenly had the moisture they needed to sprout. It was like a giant garden was waking up all at once. Ecologists were shocked to find rare plants appearing that hadn't been seen since the 1800s. These weren't seeds that someone planted. They were ghost seeds that had been waiting for the bison to return. The buffalo grass and blue grama grass started covering the brown dirt with a thick carpet of green. What most people don't realize is that bison hooves actually help the soil instead of hurting it. Even though they weigh 2,000 pounds, their hooves break up the surface crust so air and water can get down to the roots. In just 1 year, the hardness of the soil dropped by 40%. This seems impossible because such heavy animals should pack the dirt down tighter. But because bison move around randomly and don't follow the same paths like cattle do, they impact the whole landscape evenly. They're like giant air raiders for the planet. Things get even crazier when you look at the water wells on the property. Despite 5,000 huge animals drinking tons of water every day, the water level in the ground actually went up by 3.5 feet. This happened because the restored grass and the wallows trapped the rain. Instead of evaporating in the hot sun or running off into the distance, the water stayed in the ground. The deep roots of the native grasses acted like little pipes that sent the water deep into the earth. So, here's the deal. The bison were literally refilling the underground tanks just by walking around. Some scientists even think the bison's wallowing creates a specific vibration in the earth that encourages water to rise, though that's still just a wild theory. The wallows didn't just catch water, they became tiny worlds of their own. Within 6 months, these holes were full of life. Bugs, frogs, and birds all flocked to these mini ponds in the middle of the desert. It was a miracle of engineering done by an animal that wasn't even trying. Some people believe that bison wallows are actually part of a prehistoric grid system. The theory goes that the bison instinctively placed these wallows in spots where the magnetic field of the earth is the strongest, helping to charge the soil. While that might sound like science fiction, the way the plants grew specifically around the edges of these holes was truly mysterious. The water table rising is perhaps the most WTF part of the entire story. In a place like Texas, water is more valuable than gold. Ranchers spend millions of pounds of equipment and thousands of dollars trying to find more water. Here, the bison were doing it for free. Everyone's obsessed with the idea that an animal could be better at water management than a human engineer. But the numbers don't lie. The more the bison wallowed, the more the water stayed on the land. The more the water stayed, the more the grass grew. It was a perfect circle of healing that kept getting bigger every single day. If you look at the history of the Dust Bowl, you can see what happens when we remove the bison and the grass. The land literally blows away. The bison are the glue that holds the American West together. By bringing them back, Texas wasn't just saving a species, they were saving the very foundation of their state. The soil was becoming rich and dark again. If you dug a hole in 2018, you would find nothing but dry sand. By 2021, you would find earthworms and moist, healthy earth. I'm not gonna lie, it's like the bison brought the rain with them in their fur. The moisture retention was so good that the temperature of the ground actually dropped. When the sun hits bare dirt, it reflects heat and makes the air even hotter. But when it hits thick, green grass, the ground stays cool. This change in temperature started to affect the local weather. There are wild theories that the return of large bison herds can actually change the path of storms. Some people think the heat rising from the desert used to push clouds away, but now the cool grasslands are pulling them in. This would mean that the bison aren't just reacting to the weather, they are creating it. But the water wasn't the only thing coming back to the dry Texas plains. Nature rules the land. Again. Once the grass and water returned, the rest of the wild world noticed. Before the bison arrived, there wasn't much living there besides a few coyotes and some scrub birds. But 5,000 bison mean a lot of energy entering the system. Every year, some bison don't make it, and their bodies become a massive feast for other animals. It's been missing for years, but this key detail can shock the whole food chain. Suddenly, there was enough food to support big predators that hadn't lived there in a long time. Coyote numbers tripled in the first year because they had plenty to eat. Then, something even bigger happened. Golden eagles started appearing in the sky, with their numbers jumping by 400%. They were followed by black vultures and other birds that clean up the land. The thing is, the bison were acting like a giant dinner bell for the entire state. But it wasn't just about the scavengers. The return of the grass meant the return of the tiny animals too. Prairie dogs started building towns on the bison land. The bison didn't mind them at all. The prairie dogs clipped the grass short, which some birds need for nesting, and their burrows helped air out the soil even more. I'm not gonna lie, it was a total explosion of life that no one saw coming. Even the insects came back in huge numbers. Before the bison, researchers only found 47 kinds of bugs, but after 3 years they found over 300 different species. This included native bees and butterflies that help the flowers grow. With all these bugs around, more birds and small mammals started moving in to eat them. The most amazing part was when the apex predators showed up. By the second year, mountain lions were caught on trail cameras. What most people don't realize is that mountain lions only stay where the ecosystem is healthy and full of prey. The fact that they were moving back in meant the desert was officially gone, and a wild world had taken its place. Even the frogs and toads started appearing in the bison wallows. These little pools of water became the perfect nurseries for amphibians that had no place to live for over a century. There is even a theory that the bison carry microscopic life on their fur that helps restart these ecosystems. Every time a bison rolled in the dirt, it was creating a home for a dozen other species. The bison weren't just one animal. They were the engine that made everything else work. The diversity of the birds was especially insane. Birds that hadn't been seen in the Texas Panhandle for 50 years were suddenly nesting in the tall grass. Some of these birds follow the bison specifically because the bison kick up insects while they walk. It's a partnership that has existed for 1,000,000 years, and it snapped back into place like it had never been gone. Everyone's obsessed with how fast these birds found the new grassland. It makes you wonder if there is a secret communication network in nature that tells animals when a habitat has been restored. Some of the wilder theories suggest that bison act like a giant biological radio. Their large bodies and constant movement across the plains might create a signal that other species can pick up from miles away. When the bison are happy and the grass is growing, the signal says, "Come home." It sounds far-fetched, but how else do you explain a mountain lion showing up in a place that was a dead desert just 24 months earlier? The animals didn't just stumble upon it, they were drawn to it. The insect population was another massive surprise. Without bugs, you don't have pollination. And without pollination, you don't have a future. The bison dung became the primary fuel for a massive surge in dung beetles and other soil-building insects. These tiny workers take the bison waste and bury it deep in the ground, which fertilizes the roots of the grass. Basically, the bison are the managers, and the bugs are the construction crew. This partnership is what allowed the land to heal at a speed that models said was impossible. We are seeing a complete restoration of the trophic cascade. That is a fancy way of saying that when you put the big guy at the top back in, everyone else falls into line. The rodents are controlled by the predators, the grass is managed by the bison, and the soil is enriched by the bugs. It's a perfect machine that doesn't need a single human to turn a wrench. The Texas Panhandle is now one of the most diverse places in the state, and it all started with 5,000 hairy beasts and a lot of dirt. The most shocking part is how these animals might actually be the secret to saving our air. Grassroots save the air. While everyone was looking at the animals and the grass, scientists were looking at the dirt for another reason. They wanted to know about carbon. Usually, a dry desert doesn't hold much carbon because there aren't many plants. In fact, most degraded land actually releases carbon into the air, which makes the planet warmer. But this key detail can shock anyone worried about the climate. After just 2 years, the soil on the Bison Ranch had 40% more carbon stashed away in the top 12 inches than it did before. The researchers were so confused by this number that they ran the tests over and over again. It was true. The bison were helping the land pull carbon out of the air at a rate that beats almost any other project. So, here's the deal. The secret is in the roots of the native Texas grass. Unlike weeds, native prairie grass has roots that go down 6 to 10 feet deep. When the bison graze the top of the grass, the plant sends more energy into its roots to stay strong. When those roots eventually die, they turn into rich organic matter deep underground. This traps the carbon where it can stay for hundreds of years. The math is staggering. And that's putting it lightly, because this one herd was doing the work of 16,000 cars. By simply eating and walking, the 5,000 bison were cleaning the air and storing the waste under the dirt. They were turning the Panhandle into a giant carbon sink that never gets full. There is even a wild theory that the bison's breath contains specific bacteria that help carbon settle into the soil more efficiently. While that is still being studied, the impact on the atmosphere is very real. The bison also changed how fire works on the land. In the past, fires in the desert were scary and destroyed everything. But now, with the thick grass back, the fires move fast and stay low to the ground. Things get even crazier, because these fires actually help the grass grow back even better. The bison love to eat the fresh green shoots that pop up after a fire, because they are full of nutrients. This creates a natural cycle that keeps the land healthy and prevents the bad trees from coming back. Some people even suggest that the bison manage the fire by grazing certain areas to create natural fire breaks. It's like they have a prehistoric memory of how to handle the flames. This proves that we don't need expensive machines or chemicals to fix the environment. We just need the right animals doing what they have done for millions of years. The bison are the best workers we have because they never take a day off, and they love their job. Everything we thought was a desert was just a prairie waiting for its king to return. There is a growing belief among some researchers that bison are actually terra-sensing creatures. This theory says that they can feel the health of the planet through their hooves, and they instinctively move to the parts of the earth that need healing the most. If this is true, it would explain why the 5,000 bison in Texas didn't just stay in one spot. They moved across the entire 150,000 acres like they were on a mission. They were patrolling the land and fixing it as they went. What most people don't realize is that the deep roots of the prairie are like an underground forest. In a regular forest, the carbon is stored in the wood of the trees. But if a tree burns, all that carbon goes back into the air. In a prairie, the wood is underground in the roots. If a fire happens, the carbon stays safe in the soil. I'm not going to lie, the bison have created the ultimate fireproof carbon storage system. It's more effective than planting trees, and it happens much faster. The implications of this are massive. If we can turn dead deserts into carbon-sucking grasslands in just 18 months, we might have found the secret to fixing the global climate. We don't need a high-tech solution. We need a low-tech, four-legged solution. The bison are showing us that the Earth knows how to fix itself if we just give it the right partner. The Texas Project is the proof that the world has been waiting for. Is it possible that we could fix the entire country by just bringing back the buffalo? Wild future for our land. The Texas Project proved that we don't need decades to fix the Earth. We can do it in less than 2 years if we use the right tools. Most restoration projects try to micromanage every little thing, like planting certain seeds or building fences. But what most people don't realize is that nature doesn't want to be managed. It wants the bison back. The success of these 150,000 acres could be a blueprint for the entire 500 million acres of the Great Plains. If we returned bison to just 10% of that land, we could have over 1.5 million bison roaming the country again. They would be fixing the water cycles, stashing away carbon, and bringing back the wildlife on a scale we can't even imagine. I'm not going to lie, the biggest hurdle isn't the science, it's the way we do things now. Most of the land is used for cattle, and our entire economy is built around cows. Switching to bison would be a massive change that many people aren't ready for yet. But the evidence is right there in the Texas dirt. Bison are simply better for the land than cows will ever be. They don't need extra water pumped from the ground. They don't need special feed, and they fix the soil instead of breaking it. So, here's the deal. We have a choice between a dusty desert and a green paradise. The 5,000 bison in the panhandle showed us that the land wants to be wild. Some people think the bison are part of a larger, ancient intelligence that we don't fully understand yet. They say the herds move in patterns that mirror the stars or the Earth's magnetic fields. While that might be a bit out there, what's not a theory is the green grass and the rising water levels. The 5,000 bison in the panhandle showed us that the land wants to be wild. It wants to be a prairie again, and it's just waiting for us to let it happen. Walking across that land today, you wouldn't believe it was a dead desert just a few years ago. You can hear the birds, see the clear water in the wallows, and feel the soft grass under your feet. There is even a theory that the bison are actually repairing the Earth's skin. By trampling the dirt and adding organic matter, they are creating a protective layer that keeps the planet from losing its vital energy. This sounds like something out of a legend, but when you see the life coming back to the panhandle, it's hard not to believe in something bigger. Everyone's obsessed with the idea that we can just walk away and let the animals take over. And maybe that's exactly what we should do. The insane transformation everyone is talking about is actually just nature returning to normal. The bison didn't do anything magical. They just did what bison do. They ate, they rolled, and they moved. And that's putting it lightly because they saved an entire ecosystem in the process. As we look to the future, we have to ask ourselves if we are brave enough to let the giants lead the way back to a healthy planet. We have seen what happens when we try to control nature, and we have seen what happens when we let the bison lead. The choice seems obvious, but the path forward is still blocked by old ways of thinking. We need more projects like this across the entire country. Imagine a world where the Great Plains are once again a sea of grass and bison, stretching from Texas all the way to Canada. It would be a world with cleaner air, more water, and thousands of species living together in balance. The 5,000 bison in Texas have shown us that this dream is not just possible, it's already happening. Could the return of the bison be the only thing standing between us and a total environmental collapse? If these giants can heal the desert in 18 months, why aren't we doing this everywhere? Tell me your wild theories below. Like and subscribe to join the mission for a wilder world.